jackalope. Truth behind the world's most frightening rabbit. If you went on a couple of road trips across the US, you probably think you've seen a jackalope or two. The jackalope, just like Bigfoot, has become something many Americans believe in. Your neighbor might have told you they spotted them in the field before, or maybe your friend told you that they encountered one. But in reality, they are lying because jackalopes aren't quite a real species. Or maybe they are real. The answer to that question is more complicated than you think. Many myths around these creatures have existed for a very long time, but today I'm going to give you the truth about jackalopes. Earlier I mentioned that the myths around these creatures have existed for a long time, but just how long has this myth been around? Believe it or not, this has been going on even before the United States became the United States. Because of this, many people who believed in jackalopes use this as proof that these mythical creatures are real. The first time a jackalope was recorded was in an ancient Persian geographic dictionary from the 1200s. It depicted a rabbit with a single spike on its head that looked like a unicorn. It didn't look exactly how a jackalope is depicted today, but it looked extremely similar. During the 1500s, more antler bunnies popped out in various guidebooks, which includes Horace Hoffman's work series and also Walpentinger's painting from 1509. The true roots of today's jackalopes, though, trace back to Central America. One of the well-known heroes of ancient Huayco culture, known as the blue deer, said he received his antlers from his friend, which was the rabbit. In shorter terms, the little rabbit thought his horns weighed too much to cross a river with, so he passed them down to the deer. As you can see, people really believed in horned rabbits being real animals for a long time. They didn't name them jackalopes though. The proper name used at the time was Lepus cornutus. At the time, there wasn't much debate about their existence. In 1673, when the iconic British naturalist John Ray described witnessing both the head of a horned hare and also the horns of a hare, he also described seeing a mixture of other regular animal body part specimens like a dolphin's head and a tuft of a rhinoceros skin. The Smithsonians claimed that towards the end of the 1700s, the scientific belief in jackalopes died out. The reason for this is because there was a lack of evidence and the refinement of scientific methods. For some reason though, about 2 centuries later, people in the United States made jackalopes an American icon. This all began in the 1930s when 2 Wyoming brothers named Douglas and Ralph Herrick spent their day hunting. Having studied taxidermy as teenagers, they ended up bringing back a jackrabbit carcass to stuff. When they returned home, they were in a rush to eat some dinner, so they casually dumped the rabbit body into their taxidermy shop. The place it landed in, coincidentally enough, was right next to a set of deer antlers. It's said that Douglas immediately announced when they seen this that they should mount the antlers upon the rabbit's skull, and his brother went along with the idea. After some stuffing and antler attachments later, the first jackalope mount was born. Once people found out about this, the Herrick brothers had a new business plan. Selling jackalope souvenirs ended up becoming their eternal legacy. After that, once people started seeing the heads of these scary rabbit creatures mounted in bars across the United States, they began telling tall tales, and those tales became even taller tales. None of these stories didn't exist before the Herrick brothers pulled their stunt. The Museum of Hoaxes tell how cowboys in the Wild West supposedly gathered around the fire at night, sang old songs, and frequently heard the jackalopes singing back in their human voices. Hoaxers said that the best way to catch them is by using whiskey as bait because the rabbits love getting drunk from it. Usually, salesmen often told their customers to avoid the warrior rabbit in the wild, since jackalopes get aggressive when they are provoked. Whiskey was most likely the key ingredient in many of these fairy tale stories. So it was only a matter of time before jackalope sightings started becoming more popular to go along with the stories. Many of these stories came from Wyoming, ironically the same place the Herrick brothers first launched their enterprise. As everybody in the town of Douglas, Wyoming continued to really believe in these stories and get excited about them, you would think that Douglas Herrick would continue creating more jackalopes. Instead, he ended up quitting after mounting the first 1,000 of them. Taxidermy isn't easy at all, so him quitting is very understandable. His brother Ralph, though, was still very passionate about it and kept the mounts coming. According to the New York Times, Ralph churned out hundreds of things and eventually passed down the trade to his son, Jim. Jim continued to deliver jackalopes as recently as 2003. As the decades passed by, other taxidermists like Frank English of South Dakota got into the swing of things. English is currently regarded as one of the world's foremost jackalope makers. He has made a full-time job doing this since the 80s. He said one of his favorite stories came from an airport customs snafu in the UK. This place is where a jackalope head was found in an American woman's luggage and was confiscated because it was assumed to belong to a protected species. None of these jackalope mounts have ever belonged to real jackalopes, but scientific research sort of discovered a real version of them in the wild. The reason why I said sort of discovered a real version is because there are really rabbits that exist with horn-like growths coming from their head. These unusual bunnies probably played a big role in some of these myths. These growths, though, aren't antlers or true horns. They are tumors. These tumors are the result of the cancer-causing papillomavirus. This may sound familiar to you because when this virus infects humans, it's called HPV. In humans, HPV causes cancerous tumors to show in the cervix. When it hits rabbits, though, the tumors manifest as hard growths from the skull. This disease eventually causes them to die. Most of the time when these tumors grow, they don't come from the top of their heads. Many times the growths block their mouths, which causes them to starve to death. The scientist who discovered this was Richard Sharp of Rockefeller University. During the 1930s, Sharp heard about jackalopes on a hunting trip. To get more information on it, he had his friend catch a real horned rabbit for testing purposes. Sharp obtained a tissue sample of the horns, ground them up, filtered out everything but the viruses, and rubbed the filtered solution onto the heads of normal bunnies. Horns ended up growing, so that's when he officially knew that these were tumors created by viruses. His colleague, Francis Ross, ended up taking it a step further. He used the rabbit tissues given to him by Sharp and spent the next few decades injecting viruses deep into rabbits. This caused them to develop aggressive cancers. Although this work is gruesome, it was known as a landmark achievement in affirmably linking viruses and cancer. In 1966, Rouse was awarded the Nobel Prize in Medicine because of it. If you feel like you may have seen a real documentary about actual jackalopes, you probably fell for the 2006 mockumentary Stag Bunny. This was made by a bunch of recent Wyoming film school grads, ironically. Stag Bunny humorously shows the jackalope as a real animal. The people he interviewed in the film were real Douglas locals who were all in on the joke. These included Mike James, who happens to be the owner of a sporting goods store who allegedly possesses the only known jackalope living in captivity. Also allegedly has a real paleontologist who was willing to make a fake description of the jackalope's fossil record on camera. If you thought jackalopes were real before you watched this video, now you know that they are just a myth. Thank you for watching. If you like this video and want to see more videos like this, make sure you subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and leave a like. Peace.